Runback here to be your weekly intake of North American Developmental League of Legends. We are in the midst of the America's Challengers tournament where our North American teams aren't doing as well as we may have expected, with the knockout stage starting today. As this episode comes out, we're here to talk all about what happened in the group stage and also a lot more that has happened in the North American landscape over the past week. Not going to be a part 2, but that's because we've got extended headlines today, 10 different topics that we'll be discussing. My name is Grapes, going to be joined alongside Hawk as per usual. Hawk, how are you doing tonight?
Grapes, I'm doing all right. The sunburn is, the camera is really accentuating my sunburns. I was up at 5 in the morning this morning, off of a whopping, 3 hours of sleep. And then I slept in the middle of the day, and now we're recording Salty Runback at almost midnight Pacific.
Yeah, we keep getting later and later with when we're willing to record these things.
It's been, well, to be fair, we said we were going to do it at 8. And then I was like, but I'm 5 stacking with my friends from home that I've not talked to in a month. Shout out to Grapes. He's like, okay, we'll do 9:30.
I've got the whole week off. I'm chilling.
Yeah. But then we were in a 45-minute banger. So I got pushed back to 10. And then we took an hour and a half to come up with 10 headlines. So it's been a day for me, for the universe. I don't know. Has it been a day for the universe? I hope everyone out there has been good. But it's going to be one of the goofy episodes, I think.
I don't know what the viewing meta is for Salty Runback, but if you're watching this and thinking to yourself, damn, only headlines, they clearly didn't put any effort into this. We did. We thought about these a lot, and we have a lot of
really
exciting...
hard to come up with part 2s every week. Yeah.
Speaking of, well, we'll have probably another. I think we're gonna try to get an interview next week with somebody. Not entirely sure who just yet, but probably just somebody who's played in the NACL. In the last year or something like that. Get a chance to highlight them. What's up?
Here's a question for everyone. Put it in the comments of this video. I'm gonna be such a YouTuber right now. Put it in the comments of the video. Do you watch Salty Runback more for the headlines or for the part 2s? I'm actually really curious.
I'm sure there's a way that we could track our viewer analytics.
Yeah,
actually,
yeah. Well, we could really easily answer that question on our own, but that's too easy.
Yeah, let us know. What
also, let us know if you're a 3 a.m. watcher. Do we have any does anyone fall asleep to the silky sound of our voices?
I definitely fall asleep to podcasts, so that could definitely be in play.
I have a funny anecdote. We're already going off the rails. We're 3 minutes in. I'm going off the rails. Okay, I have a funny anecdote. So my senior year of college, I inadvertently trained myself to fall asleep to cage roll because I had a 9:30 a.m. class my senior fall. And that would go until 10:30, and then I had a class at 12:30, and nothing in between. So I would always kind of stay up late, go to that 9:30 class, come home, and by the time I'd get home, whatever cage roll VOD for the day, LPL LCK, would have gotten uploaded. So I would go and lay in bed watching cage roll, and then just fall asleep for a nap until noon, and so now, anytime I watch cage roll, I get drowsy because I'm I've trained myself
Pavlov's dog
to fall asleep to cage roll. I do it now too. LCK will be on, and I'll watch the cage roll Twitch stream, and I'll just kind of drift off. Dude,
that doesn't help that it's also happening super late.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So is anyone a Salty Runback sleeper?
Yeah, that let us know. I'd be very interested to find out those analytics. But
oh my god,
yeah, make sure to keep an eye on our YouTube channel as well. I know that we have some other content cooking that's not exactly the podcast that we're going to potentially be releasing soon. Each of our own maybe separate projects even. So we'll see about that. I know Hawk, you teased a little bit about that on your Twitter. We'll be talking about that, I'm sure.
I will keep it a stack with everyone. That's a month off for sure. It's it's a work in progress, but yeah, it's coming.
There will be things that are not the podcast on our YouTube channel soon. We'll leave it at that. Let's do it. Let's head into our mega episode, Hawk. 10 freaking headlines to get through, and let's start off, of course, with the America's Challengers tournament, where our 2 NACL representatives are not both advancing into the group stage or into the semifinals. Dragonsteel getting knocked out in part because they lost to FXS Starforge, who hold on. I see you changing this headline here.
Oh, it changed on the live. There we
Well,
go.
we'll fix that in a
I
second.
thought that would change only on the on the preview. My bad.
Um, as I
Well,
was saying,
Graves, so much for not cutting out anything
yeah.
in post.
No, it's okay. It's okay. We'll let it roll. We'll let it go. Um,
My
one
bad,
of the
guys.
games was Dragonsteel versus Fear X Starforge. We'll talk more about the overall results later, but Fear beat Dragonsteel in just over 23 minutes. And of course, this comes after Dragonsteel kind of owned Fear throughout the entirety of the summer split. They beat them 2-1 in the regular season, 3-1 in the upper bracket finals, and then 3-0 in the grand finals. So, Hawk, my question to you is, in a hypothetical where Dragonsteel and Fear play 100 best of fives, we're really going to expand the sample size here. Who wins?
This is such a fun question. I love the way this is phrased. Grapes
Because
came up with this
the
headline,
answer
by the way. Yeah.
changes depending on a lot of context, and also mostly depending going off of this last game that just happened.
So it's important to address the elephant in the room that the land monster seemingly struck Dragonsteel again. They were like Daniel Jones running down the field. They've hit home free. They've won the NACL, and then they just completely tripped over themselves when they were out home free.
I
Happens.
saw a tweet from Yanni that said like it was the Thanos meme. It was like, what did it cost? Everything. They
Yeah.
finally won a thing.
Hey, they won NACL. I mean,
Yeah.
that I do think. I'm actually really curious because like in tier 1, everyone's like Worlds, MSI. It's all that matters, right? Like no one gives a fuck about domestic leagues, which I think is kind of toxic. But regardless, I actually wonder what your thoughts are on this, Grapes. Like I still think winning NACL is like the bigger thing, and then winning America's Challengers is just kind of the icing on the cake. If I don't know if you agree with that.
I think, as we'll talk about later, because of the format of this, especially compared to like the way the regular season had a lot more games played, and like
Yeah.
that sample size kind of increased a little bit, which I think is partly connected to my answer to this question. That I consider it maybe a better indicator of who's number one or who's number two.
Well, and to answer the question in earnest now, I'll actually be on topic. Dragonsteel, I think, takes 60 to 65 of the games, maybe 70. Like, I do think Dragonsteel is significantly better than Fear. I think they're consistently better than Fear. I mean, if I'm being honest, like, it's not even like Fear's been having the best America's Challengers either. Yeah, I think Dragonsteel is definitely favored in that matchup still decently heavily. For as good as Fear is, I just think that they're individually outclassed in a couple of positions that make it very, very difficult for them.
I'd probably give them even less. I probably would give Dragonsteel even more just based off of the history that we saw. I mean, both the best of threes were won by Dragonsteel. None of them went to 5 even. I'm looking at like Fear's last win versus Dragonsteel, which was in the upper bracket finals, and it was a 33-minute win. That was a Blaze Olive popping off on Zeri. I definitely remember that game. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, he went 10-4-6. This was just a very clean game from the Fear X Starforge mid jungle, which I think they definitely are capable of. I mean, XU and the Blaze Olive have played in the LCS.
XU's had a really great tournament, by the way.
Yeah, XU's been great. Picked up the Nidalee, just ran through Dragonsteel a little bit. But I think the track record of Dragonsteel throughout the split kind of does speak for itself. But I think the way that the thing about this question is it probably would have been way more Dragonsteel favored until this single game, which I don't know if it's necessarily fair to bring up or not. But Fear also had themselves a solid track record throughout the regular season of NACL, so I think the answer is probably in that 60 to 70 range.
Yeah, I probably would have given Dragonsteel 80-20. Honestly, I'm probably giving them like 70. Now that I've thought about it more, I think Dragonsteel wins 70. I definitely think they're favored. But honestly, this basically leads us immediately into our next headline, which is about America's Challengers, more specifically in the performance of the teams. Because I do think whether you think it's an NA underperformance or a LLA CBLOL overperformance, the point that I kind of want to immediately tee off this conversation with is that I feel like Dragonsteel, won their finals. They've reached the top of the mountain, and they understandably rested on their laurels a little bit. And it happens, and they lost, and it, is embarrassing, but also like I can't really fault them. That also goes into like our fifth headline as well, which we'll talk about even more later. Um, like I feel like they climbed their mountain and they relaxed.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Definitely an underperformance overall compared to expectations. Of course, the question is, were our expectations wrong, or did the teams actually underperform? And I think it's probably a little bit of both to be the most fair to our our NA friends. An interesting point that I think was brought up by David Shynock on Twitter, of who doesn't always pay too much attention to. I mean,
Notorious
his
tier
content is way
2
more.
enjoyer,
Yeah,
yeah.
his content's definitely way more LCS. But he did bring up an interesting point, which is that in this new landscape where now NA and Brazil and LAN are all going to be combined against each other, the first event where the Americas are all kind of considered a region together, NA only went 5-5 combined in their round robin stage, which is interesting to bring up, and maybe shows that the CBLOL is here to play a little bit.
Yeah.
Another point that kind of goes into the format though is that Dragonsteel and Fear did not play a single best of one all season long, whereas Pain, Fuego, Vivostar, and WAP all did. Whether I think LAN has a best of one stage into a best of three stage into a knockout stage, whereas Pain Gaming and Vivo Kate Stars were all best of one regular season into their playoff elimination stage. So I don't know how much that affects it. Also, the fact that it's not fearless at this point because it's just the best of one. Those are all interesting things to bring up,
Yeah.
and maybe had something to do with kind of the underperformances of our NA teams.
So I will say I do think the lack of best of ones in NA is a little bit of cope. I've seen that take thrown around, but like, man, Dragonsteel dropped 4 maps the entire year. Like, they
Yeah.
shouldn't be losing best of ones, right? Or like maybe they lose one, but like they lost almost as many games in America's Challengers as they lost in the entire summer split. So I think that's a little bit cope, but it's an interesting conversation to have. To actually answer the question, I think it is a little bit of LLA CBLOL overperformance and a lot of bit of NA underperformance. This is a really interesting headline, right? Because I think your feeling about whether or not it was an overperformance from certain teams depends on what your perception of them was heading into the tournament. And I saw a lot of sentiment on Twitter, elsewhere, that NACL teams were going to run this tournament, which I think is fair. I think favoring Dragonsteel and Fear Starforge fairly heavily is valid. But there was an additional sentiment of LLA and CBLOL are trash. The top tier 3 teams could beat them. They couldn't hack it in the NACL, this, that, the other thing. And those people just got absolutely owned, and I could not be happier because honestly, the disrespect I thought was like a little disgusting. CBLOL has a lot of really good talent in the region, and I mean, obviously, it's still a step behind North America. Like, I don't think CBLOL's developmental scene is necessarily more robust than ours. It is a very strong developmental scene. They promote players into their regional league all the time. There's a lot of kids with a lot of really good hands playing League of Legends in Brazil. Honestly, I've always said that I don't feel like hands are really the problem with the top teams in Brazil when compared to like, mid upper teams in the LCS. Like, it's more so just the way the game is played. But at the tier 2 level, that's a lot of teams' problem, right? And Dragonsteel was kind of the one team that didn't have that problem. And so that's why I think it's massive underperformance from them. I honestly could have seen Fear, who is not as good at the game planning side of things, dropping games to a scrappy and hungry Pain Gaming and Vivo Cade Stars. Dragonsteel was a little bit more surprising. And so definitely an underperformance from us. But I don't honestly think this was that much of a CBLOL overperformance. I think these teams were just good. And I think some people out there were hating a little too much, and it was kind of weird. Like, to me, it went, I don't know, it felt baseless, and they've been dunked on a little bit.
Yeah, we didn't talk too much about the America's Challengers tournament before coming in. I think a lot of that was because I personally didn't watch a ton of CBLOL or LAN Academy until this tournament, basically. But I think we have mentioned that we were expecting NA to be the heavy favorites. So that's definitely like we're part
which
of
is
that.
fair.
I don't think
Yeah.
we didn't. I might have like put out a joke or something, or
No,
maybe a
like
half serious statement where
saying
we said
NACL
that
were going to be the favorites was not the problem I had. It was like when it went beyond that and it was like because CBLOL and LLA suck. Like it's like instead of building up our own team, some people were kind of like using it as an excuse to try to punch down,
I will
which I think
say
was goofy.
a lot of the stuff that I've heard behind the scenes is that NACL teams often scrim like LAN and CBLOL tier 1 teams and actually do pretty well against them.
I
So
can
when you
see
take
that.
that into account, that is why I think maybe people,
Yeah.
especially people that have like been in the NACL and have been in these scrim environments, could have the
We were
sentiment of
the
like, oh,
favorites.
CBLOL tier
Yes.
2, how much it's obviously it should be like way worse than CBLOL tier 1. But it looks like that wasn't necessarily the case. I will say a lot of those games were big late game team fight throws from our NA teams. Like specifically that last game that Pain beat again, that Pain won against Fear, that lasted like 47 minutes or whatever, and like Fear probably should have won that game. Dragonsteel I think had another one of those where they probably should have won, and it
The
just like
the
it was a
fear game
big
against Fuego was
throw.
goofy, man.
Yeah, there was a couple of those. So um it seemed like the early game was still there, and then it just came down to a couple of big throws, which happened in best of ones,
Yeah.
obviously. So, all that to say, only one of these NA teams is still left in Hawk, which means there are three
And
that
in
are not.
best ofs. Fearless best ofs.
That is true. That's where we shine, baby. So I'm ready for it. Let's move on to our next headline though, where we could talk about some of those other
07 wet ass
teams.
pussy esports.
Yeah, I don't know if we're gonna be talking about them much in this next headline, as we got three new people welcomed into the knockout stage alongside Fear. We got Fuego playing against Fear X Starforge, and then we got our two CBLOL representatives, Vivo Kate Stars and Pain Gaming Academy. Which one of these teams has caught your eye the most?
Oh, what an interesting question. Because these teams are so fascinating. Where Pain Gaming has, for all intents and purposes, been the better team than Vivo Cade Stars, both like the entire year and then also in this tournament. But man, Vivo Cade Stars is the father. Like when they played against each other, it was not very close, and it
Yeah.
was the best game that Cade played the entire tourney. Um, to keep things short and sweet, though, I do think Pain Gaming Academy is actually quite good. They have a couple of CBLOL veterans. Hidan and Geeks have both played in the CBLOL. Hidan has actually been like okay in the CBLOL as well. Geeks not so much, but they've both played in the CBLOL. I think their mid laner is pretty good as well. So very fun team. I've been impressed with Pain. I think Pain could beat Fear in a best of 5. Could
Oh,
beat
could.
Fear.
That's interesting. I think um they looked pretty good against Dragonsteel. Like the team fought well. And also just seeing the Brazilian crowds. Like I love how even though it's an NA broadcast and we're kind of cut away from like the main broadcast, like in terms of the production, you can still hear all the crowd noise and stuff, especially when the Brazilian teams are playing. It's pretty hype in that stadium, man. It's pretty cool. I want to shout out Vivo Kate Stars a little bit actually because I think Kisei has been playing really well.
Kiss, I
I
think.
remember him
Oh, that's
from
Cade's name. Yeah. Sorry, I'm
um,
remembering players. Yeah.
I remember him from OS when he played on I think Chiefs or one of those teams that like made Worlds one of the years. He
Yes.
might have had some NA experience as well. No, I'm just scrolling through his Wikipedia just with OC. But he played on MSI. He played MSI one year. Um, I remember him with that team. I think Kevy was on that team as well, who was on CLG for a little bit. He had that Yone game against Dragonsteel, I think it was, where he out macroed them a little bit towards the end. That was pretty fun to watch. And you know, as somebody who didn't have a lot of experience watching these teams coming in, you know, seeing Vivo Kate Stars as the number one seed, that might be enough for me to, you know, think that they could be the favorites. I mean I don't know. They're
They
fun. They're
them
fun to watch.
them and Payne get it started against each other in the knockout stage. So we'll get to find out real quick if Cade is still the father.
Well, we'll see. I mean, it's been a pretty dominant head-to-head record over the last couple of weeks, at the very least, which is cool. Let's move on to our next headline, though, which is going to talk about the format a little bit, as we are going to have something similar. At least that's the idea in the future, as there will always have to be a situation where a team will have to ascend into that guest slot for the North and South conferences of the Americas Tier 1 leagues in 2025 and beyond. So here's the headline, Hawk. Is this format it, or do we need to make some changes?
Ooh, what a question. No, I don't think this format is it. It's a very economical format, you know. We fly the teams down for a week and we play some games and we have fun. And it's not too many teams. I feel like in my head the ideal future for a format like the one or for a tournament like the one that we're seeing is I would love if this was in some way tied to LCS promotion as we continue to merger our regions, if like they were playing against each other or something for promotion in this new format that we have. And if it was a little bit bigger, I just don't know what it looks like. But like, look, I think this tournament has been fun, and I don't like hate the format. Like, I think it's fine. It makes sense. I also think like it's not the craziest thing ever either. You know?
Yeah, it's best of one group stage into knockout. I would have liked to see maybe some more teams. Although again, you're talking about saving money and saving time. They're trying to squeeze this in right before World starts, which I respect. And also of course budget and everything is in. It almost feels like this is more of like a celebration of tier 2 than it
Yeah,
is
I agree.
necessarily a true international tournament, which
It's a great way of framing it.
I don't have any problem with. Like, I love watching like the All-Star games and things like that. I loved League All-Stars back in the day. That kind of is what this feels like a bit. Um, Ways to make it more competitive would probably be adding those stakes. I think like an 8-team tournament could be fun, and this is where like the conversation gets interesting is as to like what tier 2 is going to look like in 2025. Will there be a North and South Conference tier 2 that go to meet, or will they never meet because technically that promotion spot is only available for either each of their respective regions? Will we even have something like this again? I don't exactly know, but I think something similar, more similar to how Worlds play-ins is structured, where there is a GSL group stage into like crossover knockouts, could be a little bit more of a little bit better of a format. Plus having a couple more teams here. I like the idea of
Yeah.
like a Cinderella story kind of rising through the top.
Grapes, you bring up a lot of really good points. I honestly actually just don't have much to add compared to what you just said. Other than like I guess I'll bookend it with like I I love your whole idea of this tournament kind of being a celebration. I feel like as a fun thing to fill some time between worlds and to get a little bit of cross region, you know, spice going, this tournament's been great.
Yeah.
You know, there's the crowd has been good in Sao Paulo at the CBLOL studio, and it's been fun. But like as a hype competitive tournament, it's not quite there. And you know, I guess it just becomes about what the product is meant to be, right? Because I do think in some way tying in those storylines of like promotion and development and like all that, like cross region, like that would be awesome moving forward. But you know, hey, if it's just meant to kind of be this capstone at the end of a developmental journey, I think that's fine too. Um,
Now the
but
best
yeah.
the what we really need to do is get Europe, Korea, and
Oh my
China all
God, we need
involved.
to
We do
play against
academy. We
EMEA
do
Masters
real
and
academy world.
LDL and LCK Challengers.
Yeah, because I know that they do their own tournament. Like the Asian teams do their own tournament.
Real Academy Worlds would be so cool.
That'd be really cool. I'd be down for that.
You could get like, okay, literally just get like the number one team from all of like the little EMEA regions, right? Like that go to EMEA Masters. Or I guess you could get like some of
Or
the top
just like the
EMEA
top
Masters
3 from
teams.
EMA Masters. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. But like if you really wanted to be like Mr. Worldwide, right? Like that would be crazy. APAC. Does APAC have developmental leagues? I don't know. They must.
Is that
That
is
would
that
be really
like?
hype.
Are you talking about like PCS and Vietnam and that region? Or are you talking about Korea
Yes.
China? Because Korea China definitely do.
I'm talking about PCS plus
Yeah,
it's the new APAC region, which is PCS, LJL.
I'm sure they do.
It's about to absorb Vietnam, I think.
Yeah, get them all in there too. Get them all in there too.
Yeah, get everyone. I think that'd be lit.
Yeah. Well, lot of things to propose as we can head into our final headline or of this page, because we actually have 5 more
I
headlines
do want
after
to. Sorry,
this.
hang on. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Graves. Before we move on, I do want to remind everyone that like when this tournament format got announced and it was just gonna be us, CBLOL and LLA, everyone was like, "Oh my God, NA's finally gonna win an international."
Now we're not so
Now
sure.
we might lose to CBLOL, and then
All
if
right.
we expanded it to bring in like the entire world,
We'll
we
never
just go
win.
back to having no fucking chance. We got rid of our one opportunity to win a global tournament. That'd be really funny.
All right. Well, is Fear your favorite for the finals?
Yes, I think Fear is still my favorite. I think in a best of 5 and a fearless best of 5, I trust Fear, but
I think
not
I
nearly
agree.
as
Home
convincingly
field
as I did
advantage has been pretty
previously.
good, though, I will say. Home field
Yes,
advantage has been good.
it's not strong faith, but I think it remains to be seen whether or not Pain or Cade can beat Fear in a series.
Oh, we're about to find out. Winner of that, of course, in that upper bracket final. So, should be fun to watch. Our final headline in this kind of America's Challengers-esque part of our headlines, and then we'll get into some CLOL and some other stuff shortly after that, is a conversation that kind of sparked after Dragonsteel were knocked out. We saw some tweets from the director Clerky saying that the guys just kind of were burnt out a little bit at the end of the year. They mentioned having to play basically for an entire year straight without any breaks, whether that was starting with like HUEFest last year up until now. Those group of 5 players, or with Zamudo subbed out for Niles and stuff like that, were basically, playing nonstop, competing nonstop, and goes into a conversation about what things look like in uh, Valorant as well, like with CVAL, because they just announced that there's going to be some changes to their format where there's not going to be a full regular season. But all this goes with burnout and just a discussion about the length of these developmental seasons. Obviously, like the NACL split is shorter than the general like international season, but compared to other sports like football or basketball, our off season is definitely not as long, and there's other tournaments that are happening in the meantime. So, I guess this is just a place for us to talk about this at all. Like, I mean, obviously we feel for Dragonsteel, but do more things have to be put into place in order to prevent things like this from happening?
So I think this is a really interesting conversation because I think everything that Clerky said and is so valid. And Dragonsteel has been fighting all year. I mean, they basically have been going nonstop since the beginning of January at the start of this NACL season because it was straight from NACL into CLOL into NACL again and then America's Challengers, right?
And
And
then
now
even the
they're
lands before NACL started, like Q and 66 and NACE leagues that they were
I don't
playing as
count that
well.
quite as much because there is a significant amount of more time in between them. NACE is valid. Um but yeah, you're right. Like the fall is not even completely empty. You're right about that. And of course, they've done well in all of these things, which also means that the time taken is longer. However, I'm my take on this is actually no, it's not because this is only a problem if you're playing in both CLOL and semi-pro. And I mean, like, look, I know that schools like Maryville and stuff want to continue proving that they can compete at the top and everything, but like, I'm just gonna be honest. I think choosing to be a college student and play in CLOL and also try to essentially play pro, like they're trying to go pro. I think that is a choice, right? And so, yeah, I think their season's crazy long. It's a crazy gauntlet. I don't find this to be like an invalid excuse. I think they're understandably burnt out, but I don't think the season is too long, and I don't think like things need to be put in place to stop teams from themselves. You know what I mean? Like similarly, like with Aegis, right? Like if someone's gonna go play an Aegis and then complain that their off season's only a month in December, I'm not gonna feel bad for them because they went and played Aegis. You know what I mean? Like if you're accustomed to burnt out, take that time to yourself. So and I think, similarly, like Maryville's talking about like not doing Hue, right? And I think that's valid.
Well,
Like,
they weren't gonna do it because they thought they'd be in the knockout stage. Like the
well,
tournament still
okay.
be happening.
But
Um,
regardless, they've talked about not doing stuff in the fall. Anyway, like, yeah, I think, acknowledging that it's just part of growth, but I don't think we should not have those tournaments because the best teams that play in everything can't play in everything. Like, does that make sense what I'm saying? Like, that's kind of my view.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's my view as well. These guys, I think the way that it's not just the amount of games that they had to play. It's like how intense how much effort and how much intensity they had to put into all these tournaments, like throughout the entire year. Because when you're playing together as the team that you're going to be competing with in CLOL and as a team that has like national title aspirations, NACL Championship aspirations, obviously you're going to be treating it much more serious even in these fall tournaments, and the things that aren't necessarily connected to your eventual end goal, like the CLOL championships. You'll be treating that much more seriously than maybe like your for fun ACL team that like you throw together to get some reps, and things like that. Like those lands, like I know you, kind of said like there's there's time separating those lands, but those are probably more intense competitions that you go for because the stakes are a little bit higher. The prize pool is there. The in-person aspect is always important for those things, and so I think that it just goes down to, as you said, how we discuss all of that. But yeah, I think the
Oh,
season
shoot.
works. Yeah, you
I've
did it
done it
again.
again. I've done it again.
Um, I think the season works as is, and um, people just have to make that choice if it could burn it out. And let's remember again, Maryville went the full distance out of the full distance. Not only did they like play in all these leagues, they made the finals in basically every single one
Yeah.
that they were in until of course America's Challengers. And I do not doubt that if they, didn't just come off of that huge high of going to NACL, going straight to Brazil, having to acclimate themselves to this new environment, I'm sure they would have had a better showing.
Yeah. I think this is just the price you pay from going second in NACL, second in CLOL, and now first in NACL. Like, it just is what it is. I
By the
don't
way,
think the
some of those
season's too
ACL
long.
teams
What's up?
some of those ACL teams though, like I'm
Yeah.
getting
Oh
excited for
yeah,
that
man.
team too.
No, and that's exactly my point. I mean, Grapes, I know we've had conversations about how, like, the season almost for developmental doesn't feel long enough for a lot of people. Their off season started in August, and they're done until January. So, things like ACL popping off like this are, I think, really good for the space. And yeah, I don't think the season's too long. I think everything that Clerky said is absolutely valid. I do think specifically for collegiate, there's nothing wrong with a lighter schedule on that front. But at least for the semi-pro amateur space, no, I don't think the season's too long.
Yeah, it just all goes down to how much effort you put into these off-season tournaments. Is it just to keep warm? Is it to prove yourself and all, or do you want to take it off and work on yourself and things like that? So, glad that the boys can get some well-deserved rest. I'm excited to see what they
Yes,
got
rooting
in
for them to
2020.
come back stronger for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, still love that team.
Speaking of CLOL, got to talk about HUEFest a little bit as we move into our second set of headlines that Hawk has been preparing, as you've
Dude, I've
seen
been,
a
I've
little
been,
bit
God,
here.
that's what fucking 2 hours of sleep does to me, man.
8 teams will be playing in the League of Legends portion of Hue. I believe Winthrop beat Salu in this iteration of the tournament in 2023. Winthrop will be returning with their full roster, all the way running it back, I believe. Not the Winthrop that you saw in the NACL, but Denethor, Trickster, Sword, Mobility, Chookies. I believe that'll be who is coming to the Rift this
Squad.
weekend in Harrisburg. But we also got some new faces to try and take down the defending champions. We'll go through some of the rosters, like as we discuss Hawk, but any of these new teams that are coming in catch your eye at all?
Yeah. There are there are some eye catchers. I'm trying to decide how I want to answer this question because I think there's one to me that like looks the best out of like all the changes, but then also like the one where I think I like their changes the most compared to where they were, if that makes sense. I think at least the strongest roster kind of coming in that was not already expected to be contender is probably Illinois State University, who has absolutely locked and loaded for 2024 after losing basically their entire team to just graduation. Which shout out to those players for graduating and everything. But it's PCL, Music and Cross splitting time in the jungle, Drew Dozer and Meslo splitting time in mid lane, Fatakan and NACL splitting time in AD carry, and Barlow at support, which is like this team I think has like legitimate top 8 aspirations for the CLOL season, which is not something, Grapes, that I think we've really said about ISU in a long time.
I don't know, man. They looked pretty good in the spring last year too. I
All
think
right, well, but we all know what happened.
they
Like,
probably
by
were.
by the time
I think
CLOL rolled around, I think we were pretty out on that team. So
right. I mean, my take about them is that if they had their full roster, they could have been one of those teams in the
they
top
would
eight,
not have
and
lost in the
probably
first round
should
if
have
they had
been.
their full roster.
Yeah, could have been, should have been one of those teams in the top 8 if they had their full roster because they were playing pretty well. But I do agree, adding somebody like Music, was not expecting that personally. Coming in,
No,
I
neither
didn't
was
know,
I.
I didn't realize that Music going to CLOL was like an option that he was considering. But I'm glad that he found this opportunity at ISU. I hope that Cross gets to learn a lot from him as well because he's another player that I
Yes.
still hope gets some run either
Yep.
in amateur tournaments or even with ISU like in a limited capacity. But obviously when you have Music there, he's probably going to be starting a lot. But I do think this Redbird team is pretty good.
Yeah.
PCL coming in is also a pretty big gain, and I've heard some good things about this new bot laner that they got from ERLs.
I actually heard from Cross that he was pretty hype. He wouldn't tell me who the player was, but he said they might be getting an ERL player. That is Fatakan. So, that's gonna be really interesting. I think this is just cool because to me the strongest pieces on ISU last year were Cross, Drew Dozer, and Nausicaa. Nausicaa has graduated, of course. Again, shout out Nausicaa, friend of the show. But Cross now being on this team, he's gonna get to work alongside Music. I really do think Cross is still one of the up and coming junglers that we have in tier 3. I think it's gonna be awesome. Like, we know how good of a leader Music can be as well. Cross is also a really big in-game leader, so I think he can learn a lot like about that from Music. And then you've still got Drew Dozer. Yeah, and then I mean bot lane should be good, top lane should be good. I'm excited.
All right, I want to talk about another roster, and that's
Yeah.
our friends up north in St. Clair College, who have made a couple of changes. They have Flocon coming into the mid lane, which I am a big fan of. That guy was, of course, on Layar de Guerre in the summer split, but also had some time on CCG. Did I
We
say
need
that?
to
Did I
make a
just
compilation of us like saying La de la
butchering that
Guerre.
name? Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Oh
they also
boy.
have, I believe, Lyg, Lyg is his name. I think he's from Chile, who's coming up and playing for them. Obviously, those are replacing Bakery Boy and Rock Boom, who both played well in the CLOL space in 2023. I believe Bakery Boy retired. I don't know exactly if Rocco's going to be there for next year or not, but I don't remember 100%. But I think this St. Clair team is going to be pretty fun to watch. I think having Flocon in a CLOL position is gonna be pretty cool. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, Flocon's exciting. I do worry that these might be downgrades for, well, not Flocon, but I do worry that the overall St. Clair roster is a downgrade, but they should be good. The last one I want to talk about is Grapes. I was kind of deciding between like best overall or best compared to like where they were. I think we got to talk about this Converse team.
Okay.
Ego, Zav, Painshell, Devin, and Phantom Star. I think Phantom and Ego are really big pickups for this team.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Zav is playing there for Hugh because I don't know if they have a jungler yet. They have Shorter Ace who's gonna be their coach.
They have Coach Shorter Ace. Shout out
I don't
Shorter Ace,
know.
also a friend of the show.
Yeah, I don't know who's
Congrats.
I don't know if he's, I think he graduated, so I don't think he's like a student there, which is probably why he can't be playing
I
in
think
the
he
jungle for
graduated
this
in my
team.
year. Yeah, he
Yeah, he graduated
graduated
a
in
while ago.
23, if I'm not mistaken.
But they got the solo laners from Hugh, which was a team that I think had pretty good expectations, performed pretty well across parts of the season, but didn't at the end of the day make it into the top 8. But then you got Devin and Phantom Star reuniting in the bottom lane,
It's a good
which I
bot
think
lane.
is the thing we're most excited
Good
about.
bot
Like, that's
lane.
gonna be a very, very high up there bot lane in CLOL when we get to whatever power rankings once the rosters are fully finalized.
Yeah. Nah, I'm hype about this team. I think Converse can actually do some damage. I mean, Grapes, I know I was kind of out on them last year, despite them having Devin then. I think this will be a good team.
Right. Yeah. Some of the other contenders that we have there, we have SCAD with Izo, Wartrim, and Avril coming in to join that previously existing roster in the South Conference. We have Ole Miss playing in this tournament as well, although they are running with a bunch of subs. I think Shogo, Rhino, and Stray, or some combination of those guys are all going to be there,
Some
but not
combination
all
of the
of
dudes
them.
that we know and love. Yeah.
But not all of them, and I think they have some subs like coming from their like club team. So that is going to be an interesting thing to watch for Ole Miss.
Yeah, they
UST.
definitely don't have a certain mid laner playing for them.
Yeah, oh 07. UST will also be bringing not their full roster, as they announced that Shaden will be joining their team. I don't know if we officially talked about that on Salty Runback, but that's a pretty cool situation.
Imagine
Can
having
be,
Shaden and Kenby on the same team. Like, what do you
yeah.
even do with that? Like, what's the point?
I think they announced that Kenvi is stepping away from the comp side of things for a little bit. I think he might still be attending the school, but maybe focusing on the NACL for the time being. So Shaden will
Understandable.
be playing there for CLOL, but Shaden is not playing at Hugh.
They
So I
literally have
think
the two best junglers that are beneath the LCS on their team, man. That's crazy.
I think yeah, not at Hugh though. Which means that I think this tournament is pretty wide open. There's like a bunch, like I think there's 4 or 5 teams that could end up winning it, especially because it's like a weekend tournament that has a lot of randomness to that could happen to it. We're talking about America's tournament challengers having randomness taking place over a week. HUEFest, anything can happen. I feel like.
It'll be a fest of fun at Hugh. Let's move on to headline
Nice.
number 7. As
All right.
Grapes, we're
We
gonna really just attack this one head on. There was a documentary that released earlier today about one Jet Srtty Joy, top laner for FlyQuest Challengers, and talk of the North American developmental scene for the entirety of 2024. And he said that if he is not playing in the LCS in 2025 spring, he is more than likely going to step away from competitive League of Legends, at the very least on the semi pro side. Grapes, we are downsizing next year, but Srtty is widely considered to be the top prospect in the region. Will Srtty have an LCS spot in 2025?
Man, it really sucks. This is a bad time to be a prospect that's like ready for the LCS, because the last 2 seasons there has been 2 less spots for you in the LCS. It was 10 teams in 2022 or 2023 or 20. It was 10 teams in 2023. Now it's 8 teams in 2024, and it's going to be 6 teams plus the provisional spot in 2025. I don't know what exactly the situations will be with imports coming from LAN. My assumption, at least, is that the Latin American teams are going to be mostly Latin American players. I wouldn't expect too much crossover with like NA
I
talent
honestly
specifically coming
wonder if they
over.
import any of our players. Like, I don't
Yeah,
know. Yeah.
like
But
would Srtty take a spot on the Latin American team and play
that'd be
with
crazy.
Jose Dioto or something? Like
That'd
who
be
knows?
crazy. But
Um,
seemingly unlikely.
yeah, it sucks. Like like very clearly, if this was a 10-team league still going into 2025, I mean, Srtty would have had an LCS spot in 2024, and given what he did this season, he basically like completed all those side quests in 2024 after he was robbed of his LCS spot by EG disbanding going into this season. He won NACL. He was like the best top. He was the first All Pro top laner in both splits. He won CLOL basically like with the team, as he said in the video, with the team that finished 6th place in the regular season of NACL. He joined that team and beat Maryville, which it was not all Srtty. I think like all of those guys stepped up for that one tournament. But I mean, there's a very clear, like, if you do some basic looking at the standings, like there's a pretty clear difference with what happened there. Srtty seems to be the defining factor. Can you argue that there were points this summer where Srtty was not as good as he was in the spring? Yeah, definitely. But I don't think that takes away from the track record that he has, and I think that combined with his solo queue success and all the determination and hard work that he has put in, um, takes away from the fact that yeah, I think a team should be taking a flyer on him next year in this LCS, whatever this LCS North Conference does look like.
So here's my piece. I think Srtty absolutely should be in the LCS in 2025 for a few reasons. One, I think you take Srtty over Fake God, just wholesale. Fake God has been great throughout his career in Tier 2, but unfortunately for our boy, I just don't. I think Fake God has shown now multiple times that he just can't do it at the top level, and not everyone can. Just is what it is. You also take Srtty over Castle because Castle takes up an import slot. I think there's an argument even to be made that you take Srtty over a guy like Dokla. Now, Dokla is probably better right now. Dokla won the LCS a year ago, so this probably sounds insane. But I think Srtty, the main reasons you take him are not just because he's good. He's very good. But I think because, one, right now he carries a huge brand with him. A lot of people are rooting for him. I think whatever team picks him up is going to have a lot of people really excited to go watch their games. Like, you know, people making Reddit threads all the time about Srtty breaking LP records, him talking about LCS, this, that, and the other thing. Everyone wants to see him play pro. And also, you know, I think branding is a huge part of the reason why to pick up players. Like, there are certain players in the NACL that I think also should not be picked up because of branding. Like, that's the whole thing. But yeah, like, I think branding is a huge part of it. And then also, I think Srtty is hungry. You know, he's like APA to me, or Jan, where even if he wasn't the best prospect or even better than everybody else, which he is, but like, even if he wasn't, I think he's the kind of guy that you give a shot to because he can rise to the occasion. He's proven that he will stop at nothing to do that. I think he's insane enough to do it. You know what I mean? So I think, yeah, I think you give him a shot. I mean, I think honestly, there are very few top laners that I'm obviously taking over Srtty in 2025. If I'm any team, because of like I think how much he has the potential to really make it big. And if he doesn't, he doesn't, you know, and that happens. But I think it's worth the risk.
Impact, Sniper, Whippo if he wants to stay. I don't know what, you know, his situation. If he wants to stay in NA, I think he's probably better. Everyone else, kind of in the air a little bit. You know, you got Thanatos, who knows if he's going to be sticking around. You got Licorice, who I think was fine with Dig. And then, of course, he talked about some of the other players as well. So definitely a spot is available. Before we move on, I want to also, you know, say shout out to Srtty for the discussions that he had about like his mental health and how that affected his year and how he has been able to grow from that. I think that is something that we don't see a lot of in this space specifically.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that FlyQuest was able to highlight that for him because it was a very interesting perspective into the mind of a pro player.
So I personally like Srtty a lot because, you know, people know him. He's a trash talker. He's outspoken, you know, that kind of thing. But I think Srtty, more than actually a lot of other players, is just really good at like keeping stuff real, you know, feel very grounded in that way. And I appreciate that. So yeah, I think that's a good shout out.
All right. Let's move on to our next headline. Hopefully we'll see more of Srtty in 2025. If not in the LCS, he'll be playing for UCI next year. So it's one or the other.
I can't wait for them to win West and then lose in top 32.
Dude, it's Srtty.
If Srtty loses in top 32, oh my god. He's gonna have to unwash that school, man. I don't even feel bad about saying that. Srtty, you got your work cut out for you, bro.
All right, well, let's talk about something a little bit more fun and awesome, which is about being maybe another doomer take here in our next headline.
Hey, I think we ended pretty optimistic on the Srtty conversation, actually. Yeah,
I guess so. Well, let's talk about this. We got two teams leaving the league again, and of course, we knew that this was going to happen when the format was announced, but from what we heard, NRG and Immortals leaving was not the only option that the LCS had. There were a lot of teams that were potentially exploring the option of you know, stepping out. We heard rumors of a lot of different teams being considered at the very least.
Teams trying to renegotiate their standing in the league.
You know, I don't know too much about that, but you know, we'll watch.
I don't think I'm supposed to leak that, so
there were so you know, NA is in an interesting spot with where orgs want to be in the LCS. But we also saw the influx of orgs coming in to the NACL. We had Dragonsteel with Brandon Sanderson. We had Furic Starforge. We had, of course, a lot of other organizations like Disguise still already in the league. But the question, I guess, here is this situation where the LCS teams are leaving an indication or a sign that maybe these NACL sponsorships aren't going to last forever?
Excuse me, sorry. This headline's boring. No. I don't really know how to answer this one actually. Okay. Yes and no. We've talked about this a little bit a few episodes ago, but like tier 2 is not going to be a full-time job for anybody for a while. We talked about this, right? Like for us to take another run at CLOL and tier 2 and high school leagues and actually really make them sustainable, we need like esports as a whole to kind of come back for League of Legends, which, you know, might happen, might not. I'm not here to say whether or not it will, but yeah, it's downsizing right now, and I don't think we are going to quickly rebound from that. So yes, money has exited the space that I just don't think is going to come back. But like, to be a bit more optimistic as well, I don't think it's going to get that much worse, you know? Like, yeah, I think that's my take. Like, I think there are still going to be people willing to put money towards it as a passion project or to support the players. There are going to be some companies that see it as a risky investment, you know, or whatever. And I think people will come and go, but I mean, we'll have to see how the scene changes next year. I will say, Riot Games, if I think the NACL / Academy broadcast has been in a nice pocket for the last few years. And I don't think the downsizing this year did it too many favors. And I fear if we get rid of more broadcasted games, that could be a really big problem for people that actually want to spend money on the NACL. But, you know, if NACL can kind of stay in this pocket that it's been in for the last, like, I guess, year and a half or whatever, like, no, I'm not worried that like Brandon Sanderson and OTK and Starforge Systems and all of them are going to simultaneously decide to leave and then no one's going to come back. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that'll happen.
I think the biggest reason that it won't happen is that right now the cost of operations for an NACL team are much lower than an LCS team.
Yeah, exactly.
And these orgs kind of come in knowing that they are not going to necessarily make a ton of money with this. This is their like
Brandon Sanderson
dollar.
is not using this to bankroll his retirement.
Exactly.
You know.
So in terms of these sponsorships coming in, I don't think that that's necessarily going to happen. And maybe we even see, as you maybe alluded to, organizations trying to pivot to this space to have an easier way of promoting their brand and promoting themselves because it is cheaper. But the money that you can put in, especially if you are like a large influencer or something like that, could mean not a ton to you, but it would mean a lot. But it means a lot to the players and the staff of these organizations. It's enough to kind of keep them afloat. So I think right now, the way that the NACL is structured, which we can have a conversation about this maybe another episode, but it's not necessarily about development anymore. It's about winning. Yeah. It's about promoting brands, especially now that LCS spot is in place. But that with that in place, these sponsorships are still going to exist. And hopefully we see some more influencers come in with the prospect of the LCS having a spot available for the winner of this future Tier 2 league. So I'd be excited for that. If it is moist, I'd be very down. I'm a big fan of this.
It's not moist, right? Because the whole visa thing. I think that was maybe just an Apex thing. Regardless,
interesting.
Because they were not moist.
I didn't make that connection right there. I also don't follow. I do remember like one tweet about that situation.
Yeah, there was like a whole visa thing. I don't really remember what happened either. My brain is starting to not work. The last thing I want to add on this topic, Grapes, is I guess like to kind of sum up what I was thinking and more what you said as well. Like NACL should be able to stay at least as relevant as it has been for the last couple of years. as long as like we don't shoot it in the face, right? Like, and I think that's the important thing. And so no, I'm not too worried about like some sponsors still coming into a space like that. Like NACL did a good job this year with it, despite everything. Honestly, and if future America's tournaments, anything like that, promotion, like I think it only has a potential to grow more, as opposed to I don't see it downsizing unless there are major systematic changes that ruin it. So
Yeah, I'm hoping for the best. Well, of course, let's whenever these new news comes out, might be next week, it might be next month, it might be next year. We'll be right here to talk about it. Speaking of, last episode, as we head to our next headline, we talked about things about the NACL that we think need to stay for 2025 when this new format does end up coming in. So now we're gonna do the opposite. We're gonna pick one thing that we want changed coming into this next year, something reasonable that is not like, invest millions of dollars into the NACL, because that's obviously not gonna, like, obviously we'd all want that. Obviously it's a change that would help the dev scene, but we're gonna think
have
a
us
little bit more
play a
smaller
big
scale.
combined tournament with Dota at the end of the year.
Yeah, and then just have the prize pool be the same as TI. All right, Hawk, let's shoot. What's one thing that you want changed that you think could help the developmental landscape come 2025?
Graves, I've had the last 56 minutes and 11 seconds to think of an answer to this question, and I still am struggling. I think for me, the biggest thing is in some capacity to bring back more crossover games between levels of play at the end of splits and or years. Crossover is good. We talked about that with America's Challengers. I really miss like what Proving Grounds was and what it stood for. And like I think the promotion system works, but like I just think of like how hype we get for the promotion tournament every year, and then I remember the fact that like my dreams were crushed in 6 days a week ago. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. I I guess like it's very non-specific, but yeah, that's my answer. Like I would love if these promotion tournaments, like I don't know, what if promotion tournament was like the entire bottom half of the NACL against like more tier 3 teams, and then the entire top half all has a chance to promote into the LC. Like I don't know. Like I'm totally spitballing, right? But like more crossover games are cool.
Yeah, I will say, like, if the league looks like it looked like it did, the added like if you added the top 5 and the bottom 5 for the promotion tournament instead of like the way that it is right now, like you just get a bunch of stops. Like you'd have just guys playing against
But
like
like I'm
some
fine
random
with
team.
that because that also means that like Disguise is still gonna play against fucking Blue Water. I don't know. Like I'm totally spitballing. I really don't have a good idea right now. I woke up at 5 a.m. But like that's where my mind's at. The other really good one. Now, Graves, this one might be unreasonable though. Would be to
Okay.
have us be in it more.
I don't know if that's too unreasonable, but
I don't know. It's
we'll
pretty
leave that to the authorities to
seemingly
decide.
unreasonable. No, I'm playing.
Let's think. I think so. I wanted to talk about this question both in terms of tier 2 and tier 3, but also like the collegiate space and things like that. Just ways that we can help our esports landscape that's not directly tied to tier 1, to the tier 1 Americas thing that's happening. Because clearly they have a plan with that. I think probably my guess is a lot of these plans for everything below that are still kind of in the works. I think number one, what I really liked this year from the LCS is actually like a very high emphasis on history, legacy, things like that. I think we tried to do a little bit of it more.
Oh my god. Updating CLOL Leaguepedia.
True. That'd be cool.
That's my change.
You have beef.
That's my change.
Anyway, history,
sorry, I'm falling apart, Graves. Please keep talking.
In terms of talking about these, the LCS teams, and I think that we should be trying to bring up that more, as well as just kind of holistically tying together the entire leagues. As you said, like combining tier 2 and tier 3, making people who care about tier 2 also care about tier 3, because who knows, those teams could be in the NACL next year. And then down at CLOL as well, I think there should be a bigger emphasis on like following the regular season, and I think that if CLOL was more than just the knockout bracket basically every year, it would be way more exciting. Like so many people get excited about college football. Like week 2 of the regular season in college football, everyone's pumped. You know, like what is it like? FSU is like 0-3 or something like that, and like that's such a big deal. Can you imagine if like that happened in CLOL and like everyone was freaking out about it? Like that stuff creating excitement kind of year round instead of like every little while, and finding ways to organically do that is my change. I think
Yeah.
part of that, I just want more CLOL coverage, man. Whether it's
Yeah.
you know like in an official capacity or not, maybe we'll do some more. I know we did CLOL Central last year. There's a lot of ideas flowing, but man, I'm hopeful.
If you're someone with money and you like CLOL, come talk to us.
Or talk to like GG Tech, you know, or the people involved
So
with that.
I do. I mean, I've said this before, but I do think the historical. I do think the historical mismanagements of like CLOL and high school leagues are perhaps the thing that's going to haunt Riot for the rest of their company's days until they maybe can fix it. See, Grapes, earlier, the reason why I talked about CLOL Leaguepedia is because you mentioned history, and I was like, oh my god, I've got it. No, I like everything you said. Should we do our last headline, or do you have anything else to say?
No, if you got any ideas of ways to change the developmental scene,
Let us know.
let us know in the comments below.
We have
That's
a
all I'll
lot,
say.
guys. I better see 50 comments on this video. I need headliners or part tours, sleepy callers, and developmental changers in the comments expeditiously.
All right, let's move on to our last headline, which is a review of our favorite game every split.
I don't know. I
Salty
kind of hate this game.
Bets. Hey, you're the defending champ. You won in the spring.
That's
It
true.
was
Get
pretty,
owned,
pretty
nerd.
good.
And I'm going to be the
Couple
defending
$100.
champion again, right?
Well, let's take a look. We got our if you don't remember, we got a nice little graphic to help remind everybody what all of our choices were. We of course got to pick 3 NACL teams to invest in. I believe it was after week 4 of the regular season. We each got to pick our 4 NACL qualifier teams that we thought were going to make the promotion tournament, and then we each made some prop bets, which is what made the difference this time around. The numbers are wrong a little bit at the bottom, as I forgot to add up the totals the right way again, but I ended with $2,700. Hawk ended with $2,250, which means for the 3rd time in 4 splits, I come out on top.
Dude, is predicting Ole Miss the choke of the summer? Like I just
Right,
put
'cause remember,
donkey getters.
Your
I
second
just
prop
put
bet
donkey
as well
getters.
was not Sushi getting a pentakill. That was changed. It was Shogo getting a pentakill. You really were banking on the fact that Ole Miss was going to be in this tournament, and they
Yeah, I don't really
want
want to talk about it. So Sushi not getting a pentakill didn't actually end up mattering. I still would have lost by $50. So it all came down to not predicting Ole Miss. It would have been the way. Or FlyQuest fucking finishing in finals, man. I would have ran away with it. Oh my god. I thought that bet was a lock. I remember I made my portfolio before Grapes, and he's like, damn, you got FlyQuest. And I was like, yeah, I got FlyQuest, motherfucker.
Yeah, because
And
we saw them in 4th place, and we were like,
ah,
what? Like, of course they're going to go up. And also, you did get the bonus, because how it worked was you either, if they finished 2 places higher, you doubled your money. If they placed 2 places lower, you lost all your money. And then also, there are the multipliers for finishing in the top 3 or finishing in the bottom 2 if you shorted a team.
Grapes, we both pushed by placements all of our bets.
It turns out most of the teams kind of stayed where they were. The one like big jumper was actually Blue Otter, which we were both too scared to put money into.
We weren't feeling that. How I got 250 down there. So
yeah, Blue Otter taking a game off of FlyQuest. That happened.
Hey, they took 3 games off FlyQuest, if I'm not mistaken.
They took more than a game, that's for sure.
Yeah, let's go Blue Otter. Shout out the boys. I was a believer the entire time. Surely don't watch our episode like 45 or whatever it was. Last thing I want to say, Grapes, is actually you would have fucking annihilated me if AoE hadn't decided to like eliminate
up.
Dragoon's goons. Yeah,
Yeah.
dude. Mobility. I think you owe him a drink, man. Like, I don't
do.
know.
I'm gonna be like, next time we hang out, man, I got you. You save my Salt Street bets right here. Well, yeah. Well, actually, no. It's the other way around because I would have actually made money if he choked. So I would have done better. So
Yeah,
maybe.
Shout out
Mobility.
I owe Mobility a drink. Except I still lost
Except you
because
still
I
lost.
predicted Ole Miss. God damn it.
Yeah. Thanks, Collimer. Let's wrap this thing up. We're all done here on Salty Runback. It was a good time. Hawks losing it. I am on the East Coast. It is way later for me than it is for you, and it seems like it's not the case. You're having a day.
Oh my god, guys, it's been a fun one. You know, hey, I think the people enjoy the slightly unhinged Salty Runback episodes. Grapes, you ever just like have a long day? Like this is like and then you're just like hanging out with your friends,
Yeah,
right?
that's
After
what
a
this
long
is.
day, and you're just kind of like goofy.
Yeah, I think I have.
That was this
experienced it
episode.
today. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of fun though, and
Yeah.
next week we'll be back. We'll recap the Americas tournament. We'll have an interview of some sort. We'll try to set that up, and after that we'll see. We got ACL. We got still some things happening, and of course, make sure to stay tuned to the Salty Runback channel as well because we're gonna try to pump out some more content during the off season.
Oh yeah. Big things coming from us. Make sure to tune into America's Challengers, HUEFest, and Ages Challengers League. A lot of good stuff happening over the offseason. Rooting for 100 Thieves at the World Championships starting just over 7 days from today. 100 Thieves hitting the Rift at 8 a.m. on Thursday, the 26th of September to start things off. I think that's everything we needed to plug. I plugged more than probably we bargained for.
Plug for Worlds. That's not even like what we're talking about here.
I know, but I'm excited for it. Grapes, when we were sitting here trying to write headlines, I thought of like 4 Worlds headlines. Maybe we'll have to have a Worlds episode next week.
All developmental related Worlds topics.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
mean, hey, apparently this is like the most NA players we've had since like 2012 or something like that at
Nice.
Worlds. Yeah, it's been a minute. But regardless, if you think Hawk should go to sleep, take what we said with a grain of salt. Follow us on all of our social media at Salty Runback Pod, at Speedy Grapes, at Hawkcast. And stay safe. Have a great day.